half years while this conflict has raged, or 3 years while it's raged, no one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today, because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can. So no one is being sidelined here. But President Trump is in a position that he campaigned on to initiate a process that could bring about an end to this conflict. And from that could emerge some very positive things for the United States, for Europe, for Ukraine, for the world.
Well, I suppose Joe Biden could have gotten together with Vladimir Putin over the past couple of years, while the intel community is saying he still wants to invade all of Ukraine and take over Kyiv. So, as the Wall Street Journal editorial page says, you need to have, and Secretary Rubio knows this, you have to have certain conditions met as you go down that road. I will say Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that was after his meeting, by the way, yesterday with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. I will say that Marco Rubio did say that Ukraine would be involved and Europe would be involved in negotiations, that this was just an opening round. But those comments came before President Trump blamed Ukraine for starting the war. Let's bring in right now the Democratic Senator of Chris Coons of Delaware. He serves on both the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees, and he was at the Munich Security Conference this past weekend. I want to get to a peace deal and what you think a peace deal should look like, because I think we all agree it's great. It would be great to get all the sides together and end this bloody war. But before we get to that, let's talk about Munich, and let's talk about the comments yesterday. You know, back when I was a Republican, we liked the idea of peace through strength. Ronald Reagan negotiated a hard deal at Reykjavik. He refused to give. He pushed Gorbachev and the Soviets to the wall, and they capitulated. And what we learned from Ronald Reagan, and what we've learned from strong Democrats like Dr. Brzezinski and Scoop Jackson and others, we've learned peace through strength works. We've understood that. We've also understood that capitulating to Russia means more conquests down the road for Russia. Given what history has shown us, Senator, I'm curious your thoughts about what you heard in Munich, what you heard yesterday, and how we move forward from here to get a lasting, just peace in Ukraine.
Well, Joe, thank you. That's absolutely right. The way to achieve a lasting and a just peace for Ukraine and security for the United States and the American people and for the West is for Donald Trump to show that he understands what it means to lead and to be tough, to sit across the table from Vladimir Putin, who started this war just 3 years ago by sending hundreds of thousands of troops into Ukraine, who committed atrocities and occupied 20% of this nation. Sit across the table from him and threaten him. He is a gangster and a thug. Senator Roger Wicker, who's Republican chairman of the Armed Services Committee, made it clear that he understands that Putin is a war criminal, not our partner, not our ally. And if Trump were to say, you must stop, and we're going to increase sanctions on you, we're going to send more weapons into Ukraine, we're locking arms with the Europeans and the Ukrainians, and you will lose, then there is a real chance that Putin would say, and stop, and be willing to accept a security guarantee from the United States, Western troops in Ukraine, and a permanent peace that would allow Ukraine to remain a sovereign and free country. If, on the other hand, as seemed likely from the comments of Secretary Hegseth and the speech by Vice President Vance at Munich, a place famous for Neville Chamberlain's surrender of the Sudetenland and abandonment of the last best chance of stopping the Nazis, if instead they release or reduce the sanctions, they refuse an American backstop, they begin to suggest an American abandonment of Europe and a betrayal of Ukraine, Donald Trump will be known as the biggest loser of the 21st century, the man who chose a team that includes Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China over our team that is Ukraine, Germany, France, Italy, Great Britain, the folks who have been our partners and allies for decades and who share our values.
That appears to be what he's doing.
It does.
And then what would be the next steps in this? I mean, we've got the 82nd Airborne at the border between Poland and Ukraine. I mean, where does this go? if
it goes as
absolutely
badly as
betrays
is possible,
Ukraine.
he literally begins to draw American troops out of Europe and abandons not just Ukraine, but NATO and Europe. That would be an awful outcome. It would profoundly destabilize the world and make the American people less safe. It would signal to Xi Jinping that Taiwan is next on the menu. And look, in his first month, President Trump has engaged in a dizzying series of threats.
Yeah.
He's threatened Denmark and Greenland, Panama and the Panama Canal, Canada, to turn Gaza into a Riviera by relocating millions. He has confused our partners and allies in a remarkable way.
Peter Baker.
So Joe was actually just talking about Secretary Rubio, and I have to admit that Senator Rubio of 2016, I think, would have been pretty up in arms about what we heard
Absolutely.
yesterday. And Secretary Rubio of 2024 or 2025 probably won't be. What do you think that tells us about where Republicans are? The Republican Party of Reagan, as Joe said. I mean, this is something that used to be a core value. And in fact, when Trump came in 2017, the first thing he wanted to do was lift sanctions. It was Mitch McConnell, John McCain. The Republicans said, no, don't do that. We will pass the legislation if you do. And he backed off. Where are those Republicans?
So Senator Rubio and I did a joint speech about opposing Russia on the floor of the Senate. I believe it was Senator Rubio who, in the last NDAA, the Defense Authorization Bill, led an amendment saying that the president can't pull us out of NATO unilaterally. And I did have a chance to meet with him in Munich, along with a bipartisan group of senators. And I think he remains at his core a normal Republican, a Reagan Republican. But to your point about this administration, even though Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, may know better than believing that abandoning Ukraine is in our national security interests, President Trump is the one who, I think yesterday, said it's Ukraine's fault they started this war, which is just wildly untrue, bluntly offensive to everyone who understands what's actually happened in the last 3 years. And the Republican senators who were with me in Munich, sitting across the table from President Zelensky, saying we are with you, now need to put some spine behind their statements.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, this is the enduring question. What is President Trump's ultimate goal here? I mean, and he's assisted by the Vice President J.D. Vance, who said in Munich that Germany should be included, embrace the neo-Nazi AfD party. What is the ultimate goal here in the grand scheme of things?
So I think there's a basic division between MAGA Republicans and many other Republicans. MAGA Republicans have no value for sort of traditional democratic values. And J.D. Vance, in his speech where he focused on the Romanian election, where a Putin acolyte nearly won, and denouncing Romania for having invalidated an election where our intelligence services say the Russians influenced the outcome. And then, as you said, met with the leader of a neo-Nazi party in Germany the week of their election, which produced a strong rebuke from the German chancellor. Their goals, I think, are to fundamentally remake the world order and the United States' place in that order. More traditional Republicans still believe in peace through strength and still believe in strong alliances. They're trying to get Europe to step forward and increase their contributions to security. And by the way, in supporting Ukraine, the Europeans have done more than we have in military, economic, and humanitarian support.
Right.
We're roughly equal, but they're actually ahead of us. So that factual misunderstanding underlies a lot of this. The Republicans I was with in Munich would be happy if the result of this was a stable peace for Ukraine and a significant increase in European contributions to NATO. And I think that's their goals. But that's fundamentally different from betraying Ukraine.
Senator Coons, what is the most tangible and immediate thing this week that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, Roger Wicker, Armed Services Chairman, Susan Collins, Chairman of APROPS, could do to address what President Trump said last night? What precisely can they do? How can they use their leverage substantively this week to try to course correct what happened last night?
We're going to be voting all night, Thursday night, on something that's called Vote-A-Rama. There will
on the budget,
on the budget. There will inevitably be amendments proposed that would reinforce our commitment to Ukraine, our commitment to NATO, and our intention to continue to spend to support their defense. I suspect there's going to be a moment on the floor where folks are going to have to vote one way or the other.
Okay. Democratic member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Thank you very much for coming on this morning.